Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure to find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, subscribe to the show. I'm your host, Wayne Malou. I'm joined by co-host Blake Murphy. This is what we have for you today on Monday. We're going to talk about the game that took place between the Raptors and the Knicks over the weekend. Unfortunately, the Raptors got just absolutely pulverized, but you did have alternatives to watch for in terms of the NFL playoffs. So maybe you indulge there and switch the channel at halftime. Then we're going to talk about, there's been so much focus, and there will be so much focus because a lot of the upcoming schedule will be on former Raptors. Let's check in on our exes. We got an X report for you. How are our lovely 2019 champions doing? We will check in with those players and, well, not directly, but, just see how they're doing. Obviously, Pascal made his debut in Indiana over the last two games. Not physically in Indiana, but with the Pacers. What's wrong with me? Checking on how he's doing, checking on how OG's doing, et cetera, et cetera. Hour two, we will get Vivek on. We'll look at just a big picture of, okay, now that we're in this rebuild, how long are we going to be in this rebuild for, and what are the types of rebuilds that have worked, which ones haven't. And then finally, we'll get on Michael Grange of Sportsnet. He'll join us in studio, and we will ask him, where's Bruce Brown going? Because it can't be the Raptors show without an ongoing trade saga of some sort. So, Blake, how does that sound to you, man?
That sounds good. I got a couple notes on that. Great sweater, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Saturday you had the Raptors-Knicks game, and then also Sportsnet is now the home of the UFC, so you probably switched over and watched that on Sportsnet Plus or whatever Sportsnet device. And I think it's amusing that, everyone's and look, I'm guilty of this as well. Everyone's very, very excited after the trade. Quickly and RJ look like good fits. The offense looks much more functional. We had given some warnings about what the defense looked like, and that even though it was more fun right now, it might not be very good. And now they're 1-6, and the headline item is, okay, well, how long is this going to take?
Yeah.
What does patience mean exactly? And I wrote about this for Sportsnet last week off of Masai's presser of he's saying the word patience a lot. He's a guy who has had patience with cores and patience keeping good teams together maybe longer than he should have, and justified in the case of the one that won a championship. I don't know that we've seen patience of what if we're bad for more than a year? That is kind of the question now of where, and we'll learn not a lot between now and the trade deadline, because everything that's going to happen, I guess theoretically they could take some of these assets they've picked up and trade for another good young player that fits the core. I don't exactly see who that guy would be that would change your outlook overall. That's more of an offseason discussion. But yeah, it's at least mildly amusing that the moves happened that a lot of people were hoping would happen. The vibes were better briefly, and now after a 1-6 stretch, reality is setting in. Everyone's like, all right, so next year?
Yeah. I'm not going to say that this one game where the Raptors played, where they lost in New York to the Red Hot Knickerbockers by a score of 126-100, is going to be a reflection of the entire season, but it is, the rest of the way is very much wins and lessons moments. It's wins and lessons, and this one was a big lesson in the fact that the Raptors need some size to play against them, and they need their star players to be able to just create and generate in the way that, we look at Brunson, 38 points. You look at Julius Randle, produces a triple-double, constantly putting pressure, constantly commanding double teams. The physicality the Knicks played with overall, I actually really admired that, and I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest assets for their team going forward is they can win ugly, and they can just beat you up, especially now they got OG on that side too. They can flip you over if they see Dennis again. But yeah, what were your takeaways from watching the Raptors lose to the Knicks on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, and especially relative to where we were before the Pascal trade, is that there is no longer any ambiguity about which tier of the Eastern Conference the Raptors belong in. And look, we entered the season, I think I was the low man at 40 wins. You guys were around the 500 mark in terms of predictions. So nobody thought this team was going to be top of the East. But there were some people and fans and the Raptors internally who thought maybe this is a team that could compete to avoid the play-in, win 45 games and be the 6th seed in the East. And then, things didn't go that way. After the OG trade, we kind of reset. It was well, what is this new environment with Pascal still look like? And a lot of our talk was okay, well, look at the teams in the East playing. the Pacers pre-Pascal looked good but not amazing. The Heat looked good but not amazing. And then really the chunk that was like, okay, well, Orlando, Chicago, Atlanta, Brooklyn, those are the play-in teams. 3 of the 5 of you are going to get in. Can you prove with some certainty that you're better than those teams? And that was a decent West Coast trip that this team kind of re-debuted on. A couple of close losses that, I don't think changed the Pascal Siakam outlook. I don't think really changed anything big picture, but we were at least able to have those conversations of are they better than some of these other play-in teams? And I think what Saturday's game showed, and what the last couple of games have shown, at least on the defensive side, but what Saturday's game showed is that there is no longer the discussion about whether they could be a team that avoids the play-in and compete and be competitive with the top teams of these was long gone. Mm-hmm. It's like they're not close to being competitive with those teams right now. If you face, we saw them play that Boston team, and they shot awfully that game.
Yeah, 4 for 32.
But they had no Jaylen Brown. The Raptors played a really good game with everything other than the three-point shooting, and it still never really felt like they had a chance in that game unless they had shot on the other end of things and been really, really hot. They're not going to be competitive with Philadelphia. They beat the Bucks really early in the year. But if they rematch tomorrow,
they're not going
to be competitive with Milwaukee. And look, it's the regular season. Weird things happen. You beat teams that you're not supposed to beat all the time. I'm not saying they're going to go 0-for against these teams, but they are literally 0-for in the Atlantic Division.
I was going to say, yeah.
And they're going to beat Brooklyn in some of those meetings that they still have because Brooklyn's a pretty bad team too. But you can no longer convince yourself that hey, they're on the tier of New York and Cleveland and Miami, even though they just beat Miami. I just don't think that you can believe that, and that's fine. That's a part of why you're trading away OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam to reorient for a future where you're not aiming at being competitive with the 7th best team in the East. You're aiming at being competitive with the first best team in the East. But I think you did see Saturday a Knicks team that never once felt pressed against you.
No.
A Knicks team that is, they've been red hot since the trade. They're still only 5th in the East. They're not the class of the NBA, and you just you didn't look like you were in the same league as them at all. And I think that reality has been slowly setting in. But if you needed a good push to, this team is not going to be competitive the rest of the year, that was a pretty good one, because that Knicks team looks way, way better than this Raptors team.
They are way
which
better.
is not surprising.
They are way better. That's why they made that trade for OG. And since the trade for OG, 9-2. Best defense in the association with OG. We'll talk more on the X report when we check in with our X's, because we have a lot of them across the country now.
Yeah, Vivek also had a really good piece before that game at sportsnet.ca kind of about OG's fit. So we'll talk to him a little bit about that as well.
But in any case, on the Raptors side, the reason you tuned in to see that game as a Raptor fan was for the vibe. Just to see what the reunions look like. See Precious and Malachi, who scored with ease against the Raptors. Unfortunately, Precious goes 9 for 10 for his breakout performance with New York. Before that, he had done very little. Obviously see OG, see the Quickly and RJ get their tributes in, and it was about, the reunion. It wasn't actually about the product on the court, because the Raptors went up by 10 because they forced a lot of turnovers and they double-teamed the ball, and the Knicks were sloppy, and the Raptors were able to get out on the break. Basically, by the end of the first quarter, that 10-point lead had already gone away, and eventually, the rest of the way, the Knicks just steamrolled the Raptors, especially in the second half. So I think, especially now when we're taking a longer-term focus, a longer-term outlook on the team, there's going to be so much discussion every single game, as there pretty much was prior to the trades as well, but even more so now about how are Scotty, how are Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, these 3 in particular, how are they adapting to this? And so you got to see Scotty and Emmanuel Quickly go up against a really good defense, against a coach in Tibbs who is very good at scheming defensively. How did you think the Knicks approached guarding Scotty and Quickly, and how do you think those two handled that extra attention?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a story of 2 different parts of the game for the Knicks. And the one early on was, well, let's overload on Scotty and Emmanuel Quickly. Let's make sure they're not the guys taking shots. And look, if our old friend RJ beats us, if Gary Trent has a hot night shooting, if Jonte Porter makes some layups, then they'll live with that. And that's what kind of played out as the Knicks chipped into that initial Raptors lead and took their small lead. Scotty had a difficult night shooting the ball and getting to the line and things like that. The Knicks are very, very physical. And, we've talked about before, one of the learning steps for Scotty is he's so eager to finish through contact and just be powerful. That sometimes you don't always get those calls, and the Knicks, tried to turn him into a non-paint guy a little bit. I thought Emmanuel quickly, it's a tougher one because he made good basketball decisions mostly, and it passing out of that extra attention. And I believe it was a season high 11 assists for him. You got to take more than 8 shots. You got to take more than 4 3-point shots. This offense needs this offense too desperately needs what you bring as a pull-up shooter and a creator for you to kind of accept that to the degree that he did. And then I thought what was most troubling, I guess, longer term for the Raptors here, longer term, and I mean the rest of the season, not long term, is at a certain point the Knicks kind of were like, we don't really need to throw all this extra attention at them.
Yeah.
And they eased up a little bit, and, Scotty at least tried, but quickly really didn't get much going. And, that's a matchup where I know he wasn't guarded by Brunson the entire time, but, that's the guy you were stuck behind. Even if you're boys, even if you like him as a teammate, you got to want to show a little bit when he's guarding you that you can have some of that. And I didn't really see much of that. Again, Scotty's side of it, I understand more because he was guarded by OG, and there's just so much physicality and size on that Knicks team. But I really did think that the Knicks reached a point in that game where they were like, we don't need to do all this to get the ball out of Scotty and Quickly's hands. We could just guard straight up, and they're not going to be able to score at that level. So I don't know if you saw something differently. Obviously, the numbers are also skewed by there was 12 minutes of garbage time in this game too. Yeah. But there wasn't a lot there. It was one of the Raptors' worst offensive performances of the entire season, actually, and that includes they're on a points per possession basis. Their games against Boston and New York in this last week, you have to go all the way back to the first week of the season when they were when we were talking about how historically bad the offense was. For the last time they had 2 games like that poor offensively.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of the discussion since the trade was this team is now making a lot more sense offensively. Of course, that included Pascal
and Jacob
and a lot of those. Now, Jacob obviously dropped off with the injury, and hopefully he's back soon. We should know at least as of this week if there's an official update on his return from an ankle.
Yeah, so tomorrow is technically the 2-week mark of when we're expecting an update. I certainly plan to ask pregame what the latest is, because he hasn't even been upgraded to questionable for a game yet.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him doing stuff at the facility and just getting his usual hook shots in
on that cool board where it can measure how much of your weight distribution is off from normal and stuff like that as you're doing push shots and stuff.
That's actually pretty cool.
Also, they have 3 days off in a row this week, so why even if he was 99%, why would he play today, right?
No, exactly.
You've got 3 days off coming up.
But still, the general point is they were really good offensively, and of course that included Pascal having a really, really nice stretch offensively in the middle of that. Now, they've also had some really good performance offensively without him. I mean, the Miami game was a big indication. Of course, they hit 23s in that game, but still they moved the ball really beautifully. The question moving forward is just how are these guys going to be able to handle that, because everybody else now moves up one notch in that scouting report. Scotty Barnes, probably most nights will see double teams. Or a lot of nights they'll see defenses where they got physicality and they're going to try to make Scotty score from the perimeter.
You're going to see that tonight, I think. I think they'll put Jaren on him.
Yeah.
And, try to keep him outside of the paint and turn him into a mid-range guy. And, if you can do that, if you can do the kind of spinning fadeaways from 12 feet, more power to you. But I think they'll try to turn Scotty perimeter-oriented tonight.
Yeah, and it's going to be the same thing for Quickly. And so I think what to watch for the rest of the way with these guys, rest of the season, moving forward next season and beyond, because they're both going to be here, is are they able to take on that extra responsibility? Because I do think that, you can't necessarily when you're the second or third option, you can kind of shirk responsibility in a way and be look, first off, this guy's got it going. Let's go feed him. And you know what? If I'm the second option, a lot of the nights, it's not necessarily on me to decide how the whole offense is going to be run. It will be that now. It just there is almost no gap at all for a quiet night. If there's a quiet night, you're not competitive. If you have a big night, you're probably competitive and you have a chance to win. So you're going to need to see these two just assert themselves more and more. And, of course, that's not going to mean that their skill sets are going to instantly appear out of nowhere just out of sheer aggression. But I would like to see, even if the efficiency comes down, I don't mind that. I need to see the volume stay high for both of these guys.
Basically, if RJ and Gary Trent are going to be your leading scorers, that needs to be because Barnes and Quickly are doing such a good job that the defensive attention
and
has turned that way.
The first half that they did. Like, again, like I'm not asking them to 4 shots over double teams. They can continue to make passes. The Raptors have enough shooting around them now that they can kind of capitalize on that as long as Gary's shooting 50% from 3, which is what he's doing the last month. But aside from that, it's like, yeah, you're going to need to see them step up like every single night. Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance to even compete with this group.
And this is the challenge for those guys. We talked about when the Raptors acquired quickly, and we got into it more on the like tactical side of like, what parts of his game can he do more volume? But when we talk about like, can you scale, to use like the tech bro term, it's like, yeah, 24 minutes a game off the bench, you can play this style and have this shot mix, and this is your bag. What happens when it's 32 minutes a game? Can you do the same thing? Can your per 36s keep up when you're playing actually 36 instead of 24? And like that's not just an energy and efficiency thing. It's also a like, well, that's 50% more looks the opponent is getting at you, and more tape. You're a greater focus of the defensive game plan and stuff like that. So none of this is like unexpected. It's the challenges of, like you said, everyone kind of stepping up. Scotty stepping from 1B maybe to 1A, and quickly going from really like number 4 in New York to number 2 now.
Yeah,
in Toronto.
Well, the quickly part is the most interesting part to me because since coming to Toronto, he is scoring a little bit more in terms of just raw scoring. He's averaging with the Raptors 17.5 points per game. He was averaging 15 with the Knicks. But he's playing 7 more minutes per game, and he's only taking 2 more shots. His usage is actually down as compared to what he was with the Knicks. What do you think is going into that? Because you would have expected that to be in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I certainly would have. And I think there's probably an impact of Jakob Poeltl not being there, where quickly is more, he's a comfortable pick and roll guy, and he's used to getting his floater range stuff out of pick and roll and things like that.
Can he get that with Scotty though?
He should be able to. I would like them to mine that a little bit more. I actually think tonight's a good night for it because, I mean, Jaren on quickly is not a good matchup, but you're going to want to get Scotty off of that matchup as much as possible. The Grizzlies, as they are right now, the zombie Grizzlies, are not armed with as many guys as they normally would have to guard Scotty. Like, I think my guess is Vince Williams Jr. gets the quickly assignment, and then you're kind of probing that mismatch with Scotty. Anyway, I think some of it is like Quickly's a young guy who hasn't had the keys before.
Yeah.
And in New York, it was when he would start, it's pretty clear what you're being asked to do. Jalen Brunson is out. You fill Jalen Brunson's minutes off the bench. We just want you to fill Jalen. Like, Jalen Brunson runs a ton of ISO, and you have all the leeway in the world to take a lot of shots. His bench role is one thing. With Pascal and Scotty, I think it was pretty natural for him to step into not a tertiary role, but like, hey, I play a lot of my minutes with 2 of Brunson, Randall, and RJ cooking over there. I know how to be a number 3 guy who brings the ball up, starts a set, and then gets off the ball. But now the ball's in your hand every possession, and that takes some learning. I'm trying to say this without being critical of him, because I understand trying to make the right basketball plays, trying not to overdo it in a larger role here and stuff. I really do think he needs to be more aggressive and look for his own shot more.
Yeah, I would love to see that aspect of this game. I mean, to his credit, his playmaking has doubled. He's at 5.7 assists
with almost no turnovers
compared to 2.5. Yeah, I mean, he's a really responsible point guard. Like, I really enjoy his style of play.
What are his turnover numbers at right now?
It's only at 1.2 per game, and it was at 1 a game with the Knicks.
Okay, so he's almost doubled his assists with only a 20% increase in turnovers.
Exactly.
Pretty good.
So I think that, like, overall, he's doing a good job. I just think that, especially on nights like that against the Knicks, where it's just like, okay, you know what? First half, playmaking is really well. But second half, when they ease off of you, you need to go at them every single time. Like, Jalen Brunson's not giving an opportunity to not double team. You better double team him. You better track him off ball, because otherwise he's going to shoot it and he's going to find a way to attack you each time. Same thing with Randall, and I think when you're the number 1 guys, you kind of have to be like that. In terms of, I mean, the reason why the Raptors lost was size. Like, the Raptors got rebounded by 30.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a lot of discussion. Well, there's no Jakob. Hopefully Jakob comes back and whatever. I feel like it's worth noting that the Knicks also didn't have Mitchell Robinson. Like, both teams were actually without their starting center.
Isaiah Hartenstein left the game hurt.
Exactly. So I do think that overall,
it's like, you got outsized by Precious Achiuwa playing 25 minutes?
Precious bullied the Raptors. It was actually kind of
18 and
sad to
11.
see.
It was wild.
On 9 of 10 shooting. My goodness. But
Yeah. And look, like, I think
the Raptors not play physical enough, though? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a part of it, and they're smaller. Like Quickly is a good defender, but I wouldn't say he plays like above his size defensively.
He's not a Kyle Lowry, like taking charges and all that kind of stuff.
Gary Trent, not a physical defender, not
he defends with his hands. That's about it.
Exactly. He's a an opportunistic defender. RJ, an okay defender, but like he's undersized playing like the 3 and a lot of these minutes the 4.
He's not a stopper type.
Yeah.
Yeah, not like OG.
And like Scotty can play physical. Jonte is already foul prone. So like I don't know how much more physical you want to ask him to be. He also had a weird game where like he missed a couple of the bunnies. His hands were really good and active defensively, but I didn't think he was good defensively. You know what I mean? Like he had 4 of those like kind of strip steal blocks. Anyway, it was a weird game for him. Also, like and people know that I was fond of Jonte and think he deserves an NBA shot. Starting 20 minutes a game is a huge jump from you were readily available in the G League a couple weeks ago. Like he is being overexposed a little bit with how much they have to ask him to do right now with Jacob out. So that's all some of it. And then look at the guys that they bring off the bench, right? Like Bruce Brown plays way above his size, but he's 6'4". Like you can't play 7 feet if you're 6'4". You can play 6'8", 6'9". There's not a lot of size there. Dennis is small for a point guard, even though I would say he's on the more physical end relative to his size. Chris Boucher, obviously not the most physical of presences. He's more about what he can do in open space. Thad Young is Thad Young at this point. There's just not it's been such a quick turnaround from a couple of years of, we don't have a center, but we're way bigger than you at every other position, to now they're just like, they're small everywhere now. Yeah. Other than Scotty is going to be bigger than his matchup most nights.
Yeah, well, I mean, we even saw it the other night when they were closing at Chicago. It was Scotty plus 4 guards who were 6'4" and under.
With like Vucevic on the other side and DeMar, who plays huge. Like DeMar can comfortably play the 4 at this stage in his career.
Plays huge offensively. Defensively, whatever. We don't have to talk
and Caruso's the opposite. Where it's like,
Caruso is the opposite, man. Also, why is Caruso just allowed to just grab and bump and like, he's very good at defense. Let's say that much. Yeah. And the reputation, I think, is also a factor there.
Also, I know the Bulls are in a play-in spot, but like, can we get Caruso on a real team?
Yeah, here's the thing. I feel like the Bulls, like, management-wise, I don't know. They might look at it like, you know what? If I choose to rebuild, I'm probably not going to be your managing the rebuild.
Yeah.
So I might as well
given how the last couple of years went.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you were going to look at it on the positive side, so first off, Chicago is only 2 games under 500 now.
Yeah,
they're not that far behind Orlando for 8th.
Yeah,
and Kobe White breaking out like this, it's been nice. If
Levine's out another couple weeks now.
Yeah, he twisted his ankle against the Raptors. Right, I didn't even see the play, but he was super pissed off when he got off the court.
I was surprised he came back into the game, given
Me
how.
Too. Yeah.
I know how these things work with ankles, though. Like you tape it up quick before
you try to give it another shot.
Jakob stayed in the game that's with the ankle injury that's now cost him a couple weeks, right? So that's just kind of how it goes. But yeah, I mean the Levine thing's interesting because like it could potentially keep him injured through the trade deadline now. And what does that do? They're just an odd team, and I don't mean to say like get Caruso on a real team that like the Bulls aren't good or interesting. They are, but they're interesting in a way that I don't agree with them staying where they are. You know what I mean? Like I don't mind watching them night to night. I think they'd be cool to watch in a playing game, even in a playoff series against one of these better teams. But like process wise, management wise, they should not be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but I mean, when the management is the group that built this team, it's going to be really hard for them to sell the idea that they got to tear down that exact team while still remaining in charge.
Tear it down that much. It's just like you could get a lot for Alex Caruso relative to the fact that he's
They could probably get more for Caruso than they get for Levine, which is kind of hilarious to think about.
Yeah, because I mean Caruso's got I think 1 year and $9 million left on his deal. Like and then like DeMar's an expiring, so like
you could
DeMar's not coming back.
Well, actually, I don't know. Where is DeMar going to go next year?
One of the LA teams. He's going to enter the Jamal Crawford phase of his career, where he's just like a really, really good bench piece for.
Man,
yeah. Don't you think that's the like? I know
take a big discount though. I feel like DeMar is still such a quality player that like he shouldn't be taking the mid level or something like that.
Yeah, he doesn't have to.
Yeah,
there will be better offers than that out there for him. But it's also like this is what
DeMar's made in his career.
He's played 15 years in the league.
Yeah.
So like at some point, does he transition into like I'm not ring chasing necessarily, but like I'm willing to Russell Westbrook. I'm going to lead the bench unit and close with the starters sometimes. And like Westbrook makes $5 million. DeMar's going to get more than that.
I was
like,
going to say
the mid level will be the absolute floor for DeMar. Anyway, he's going to be 35 next year too. Like that's although DeMar's weirdly become like one of those
ring, man.
Yeah.
Somewhere like
as like a really good bench piece that you can close with sometimes too if you're like trailing in a game or there's a good defensive matchup for him. I think this is the thing too is like with his offensive game and how versatile he's become even without the 3-point shot, like he really can fit anywhere offensively despite not being a shooter.
I don't think Philadelphia would sign him, but they do have a lot of cap space and they're a really good team.
Yeah. I wonder what the relationship with Nick Nurse as an assistant was like. Because he never played under him.
Yeah, that's true.
God,
I don't want to see. You know what? The X report is coming up.
Yeah. Also, like, God damn. Wouldn't it just feel like? Don't you think it's been coming that DeMar's going to end his career on one of the LA teams? Like,
I
like once it was off the table.
Like he's going to have to take like a $5 million deal or like a $2 million deal. Like
the Lakers aren't in that bad of a cap spot, actually.
Okay. All right.
They're in a weird spot this year where like they're hard capped this year, but that has kept them from doing too outlandish of things. I don't think it would be like, I think you'd still have to unload D'Angelo Russell or Rui in like a sign and trade kind of thing to make it happen.
Yeah.
But hasn't it felt to you like DeMar will end up on an LA team? Like once it was off the table that like he couldn't play in Toronto his whole career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing came up last time he was a free agent was, the Clippers were trying to get after him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the Bulls came through and were like, why would you take $14 million if we can pay you like double that?
Yeah.
And we're going to make you our guy. And so he went to Chicago instead. That was like 3 years ago now. But
yeah. And that's where like that contract was there when you were 31. Is that there when you're 34 going on 35?
Yeah.
Even though you really haven't dropped off as a player very much.
His consistency has been remarkable. But DeMar's also made $230 million. Like if he wants to go chase a ring, like.
And like the Clippers aren't going to be the team because like they're in like super luxury tax hell and like there are these new rules coming around the second apron next year where like they're not going to be able to do anything. Like they're not, the way they're currently constructed, they would not be allowed to aggregate salaries in a trade. So you can't even do the like I'm going to add 3 salaries up to trade for a guy.
Yeah.
They're not even going to be allowed to do that as currently constructed.
Right.
And you can't trade your first 7 years out. There's just like there's so many restrictions coming. They probably won't be the team, but the Lakers, I don't know, I could see it.
Yeah, this has been this is part 1 of the X report.
I'm sorry that it went there, but like
it's actually good because
the Raptors Knicks game was just not that interesting.
No, it isn't. And we're gonna talk more about what a rebuild looks like in general. But I think in the meantime, there's been so much talk about the former Raptors, and so let's actually take some time to talk about those former Raptors. We just talked about DeMar, still going amazing, and maybe go ring chase. The Bulls also like decent team honestly since at least since they figured out midway through the season. But we'll check out other guys. Pascal made his debut with the Pacers. OG, how he's doing with the Knicks. Fred's coming to town in a couple of weeks. Let's see how Fred's doing. So all that after this break. Been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Willow. Continue to be joined by co-host Blake Murphy. So, yeah, we are going to talk about the former Raptors. These are the X-Files, EX-Files. So we just talked about DeMar DeRozan, what options he may have with his possible future. I mean, look, if he wants to get cashed out, Chicago makes the most sense for him. If he wants to contend and chase the ring and take a discount to go elsewhere, lots of options on the table for him. Honestly, I'm hoping he goes west, but if he goes to like Miami to join Kyle and Jimmy, that's kind of fun. Or if he goes to Philadelphia and just completes that team, it would also be kind of terrifying. But either way, I'm really rooting for DeMar DeRozan to win a ring. But we also saw OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, Malachi Flynn with the New York Knicks playing against the Raptors over the weekend. Yeah, what are you seeing from those guys since they left from Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much of a take on Malachi Flynn and Precious fitting in there.
Played, honestly.
Yeah, and like it's been mildly amusing for Knicks fans to get the Precious Achiuwa experience, where games like Saturday, he looks like, oh my God, he's a future starter in this league. Look at the defense, look at the rebounding, look at how he operates offensively in space. Yeah. And then there are games where Tom Thibodeau only plays him 4 minutes because he plays 4 minutes, and it's like, this guy has never played basketball before. What's going on? So
is he going to be in the rotation when Robinson comes back? Or is Robinson out for the
Robinson's
season?
done for the year.
Oh,
I think they got, if I'm remembering right, they got denied the disabled player exception for Mitchell Robinson.
Okay.
Which means he's not. So to get that, you have to be sure a guy's going to be out through June. So like he wouldn't come back even if the playoffs, but that is apparently still a possibility. I don't think they're expecting him back in the regular season remotely close, because they did apply for that disabled player exception. So I don't think he's back. I think given the way Tibbs has preferred his teams to play, Precious Achiuwa would be in the playoff rotation because Tibbs just isn't going to play without a center.
Yeah, that's true. You're right.
But I would also imagine they're in the market for an extra depth big. I mean, they're probably in the market for a lot of second unit stuff right now.
Yeah. Bruce Brown, for example.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that actually in segment 4.
Yeah, we'll talk about that with Grange.
So how's OG doing though?
Yeah, OG's been tremendous, man. And Vivek Jacob wrote a really good piece at sportsnet.ca on Friday, kind of going into what that fit is. I know you've got some of the numbers down there in the doc. Numbers guy over here. He's been ridiculous. The Knicks win his minutes by a significant margin. You're seeing these Knicks writers. Tommy Beer had a really good thread the other day about how, Tom Thibodeau's quote of OG is a defense unto himself, and just like a bunch of clips of, if a guy in your defense can do this, and this, everything else is so much easier because that guy is making up for the mistakes of others. He can switch around matchups. He can, help into the paint and still recover really, really well. He can get beat and still make those rear view contests to make it difficult. He's not. I guess the only knock on OG really defensively is that he's not a great defensive rebounder, and that's in part because he's always all over the floor scrambling around. But even his defensive rebounding is up like 30% with the Knicks. So there's nothing he's not doing. I think if you were to look at what he's done and search for something that it hasn't been, an immediate snap into place, it's difficult. He's shooting better. He's been 50, 40, 90 with the Knicks. 50% from the floor, 40% on threes.
Just based on
the
fact that he shoots a three so well, and he's a pretty good finisher. He doesn't take shots that are like out of rhythm.
Exactly.
Usually. Yeah.
So he shot really well. I would guess if there are people out there who didn't love OG Anunoby the way I did, their knock would be, well, see, your offensive role is actually even smaller. You just can't command those type of touches. I think that's fine.
That's totally
I've always
fine,
contended that I don't think OG felt as strongly about that as the reporting around it. And it's part, like, he left the agency that was so leaky about him wanting a larger role to go to an agency, by the way, that now runs the team he's on. So his usage has dropped dramatically. It would be the lowest it had been since 2019, 2020 with the Knicks, but he's been lethally efficient. And I think, look, we've known here for a long time that he's one of the very best defenders in the NBA. And whether we like it or not, his chance to really, really show that at a national level was probably during the playoff run that he didn't get to play in, unfortunately, and the run it back season that then got cut short. He made all defense last year, which he absolutely deserved. He is, if he plays enough games, because he's only at 38 games.
He might be the first. He's probably in contention for first team all defense. And even in some small consideration for defensive player of the year.
The Knicks keep being the best defense in basketball since they acquired him, and they will, by the way, that's
a great argument, by the way, for him to, like, in terms of just a case narratively for him.
Like, he'll have played, assuming he doesn't get hurt or whatever, like 45, 50 games with the Knicks by the end of the season, plus what he played at Toronto earlier in the year, where admittedly his defense was not at that level. You're going to see him on some all defense ballots if this keeps up, because like it's the same guy he's been in Toronto, but you're now doing it on a big stage with a team where you can draw a line of this is who they were without OG and this is who they are with OG. Whereas the Raptors just always had OG. So it's sometimes hard to see the contrast. Like, you see it now. One team's defense continue to slide. One team's defense has reached a completely other level. And I mean, it's great that he's doing, he's knocking down his threes and finishing in transition. It's just, there's no extra to the offense. I don't think we were really expecting that anyway.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, the worse the Raptors defense does, the better OG's case for defensive player of the year becomes, because
so that's why they're playing so poorly defensively. They're helping OG.
They're helping OG get paid this offseason. So OG plus 190 since the trade. So for the last 11 games, that's tops in the league. All three top, plus minus in the league since the OG trade are all Knicks. Brunson second, and then Hartenstein's third. So it's obviously a measurement of the fact that the Knicks have also been really successful. But
9-2.
Knicks are 9-2, number one defense in the league since OG arrived there. Pascal also made his debut with the Pacers this past weekend. Both games, I believe, were on Sportsnet. So he unfortunately lost to both teams. They lost to Portland and they lost to Phoenix, both on the road. But
to be clear, no Tyrese Halliburton in the Phoenix game. They played the Suns tough. Halliburton, I don't know if it's a load management or maybe he just came back a little too quick from the hamstring
he
thing.
did the splits. Like
I know.
I can't believe he came back in 2 weeks at all.
But I do think I did want to qualify that because they should have won the game on Friday. But on Sunday, they without their star player hung with the Suns and went bucket for bucket with KD until the very end when KD was Kevin Durant.
So game 1, Pascal goes 21-6-3. Second game, he goes 15-4-7. Unfortunate note, he had to guard Jeremy Grant and Kevin Durant, who dropped a combined 77 points on him. That's tough. Jeremy Grant's always giving Pascal problems, I feel like, defensively, and then KD is KD. But in any case, what did you see from Pascal in the 2 games he's played for Indiana so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a really nice offensive fit. Obviously, that game yesterday, he didn't get to show off as much of the scoring load as they were probably hoping he could on nights Tyrese isn't there or whatever.
In a bit of foul trouble too, I feel like.
Yeah, in a bit of foul trouble. Also had 7 assists, so he did the playmaking stuff well. I just think offensively, it's just going to be such a great fit. Like you saw a handful of times Friday, just how much space he had to operate in, like those situations where the Raptors would funnel offense to Pascal against a mismatch or to create something in the post, and immediately it was a double team or like that 5-body shell around the paint where there's no space, and you just can't do that with Indiana. Like Miles Turner is a really natural pairing with him. Obviously, when Tyrese Halliburton is there, Buddy Hield with a tremendous spacing and gravity element. It's all going to work offensively. Defensively, I think that maybe his reputation, he had not been as good defensively this year and even last year as he was earlier in his career. And I don't know that had caught up reputationally. Yeah. He is still better than most of the options Indiana has for top guys. Like Aaron Nesmith is just not going to play enough minutes to be that guy.
Yeah. You also need more than one defender.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if Indiana thought Pascal was going to come in and be their LeBron, KD, Jeremy Grant stopper, he's not that. He's a solid defender who really, really, really fits offensively.
Yeah. It was interesting because the Pacers had him playing some small ball center. And I'm curious to see how that holds up. I don't necessarily think that's the best way to use him, because the last time we saw Pascal play small ball center was the Tampa season, basically. But yeah, still it's funny watching the Pacers broadcast because they're oohing and on each time he scores a turnaround jumper or he hits a spin move.
He hit one
something.
over KD, which is
hit one over KD. I totally get oohing and awing, but still, there is going to be, I think, a baseline that they're going to provide for the offense, in the sense that if they find Pascal, they're always pretty much going to generate a good shot in that offense. Now, the thing is, I just feel like he doesn't really, it's not a surprise, he doesn't really know how to be in that offense right now.
No.
A lot of times he was cutting off guys in the same spot, or other guys were cutting him off in the same spot.
And what did Bruce Brown tell us his first game? He's like, in Indiana, he knew exactly where shots were going to come from, which tells you that even though this is a free-flowing, high-pace attack, there is a structure and a system in place of Tyrese is doing this, so you belong here, and this is where your shots come around that. And Siakam's going to make them a little more versatile in that regard, because it's another guy you can dump it to create offense. But yeah, it's going to take some time to learn where you fit in and where those shots come from.
Absolutely.
Fred, I thought overall it was good.
No, overall he's been good. He's going to be totally fine. Fred in Houston. We haven't really talked that much about Fred VanVleet in Houston.
Well, 2 matchups coming up in the next couple of weeks, so get ready.
There you go. And Fred for the season is averaging 17.3 points, 3.8 rebounds, 8.6 assists in 37 minutes per game. He's shooting 41% from the field, 39% from 3, 87 from the foul line, for a true shooting percentage of 56%. Basically, a Fred season, a normal Fred season. That's pretty much what you would say. Probably a little bit high with the assists,
and a little more efficient shooting than we saw in Toronto. But that's I think that's in part because the usage is down, and he's able to. He still takes a ton of threes, but some of those grenade end of the clock threes are not his responsibility now, and I think that helps your efficiency come up a little bit. When this would be a career high in true shooting percentage for him, but it would also be the second lowest usage of his career.
Yeah, but
those are related.
Those are related, and that's typically how it goes. And I think that he was pretty clearly overused in Toronto, especially with no backups. But I also think that one thing is, Fred has always been this really good pick and roll player. And the combination with him and Şengün, we figured this out today when we were looking up stats.
It's crazy.
So on the season, Fred VanVleet has 135 assists to Alperen Şengün. That's 3.4 assists per game, one way from Fred to Şengün. And then we looked up the numbers. That's the number one combination in the league in
By
terms
far.
of, yeah, right. Fred to Şengün is the number one assist combination. Second is Halliburton to Turner at 113. Number 3 in the league is LeBron to AD at 98. 135 assists on the season to just one guy is just absurd. But
to put that differently, they have 35% more assists to each other than the second next highest combination.
Yeah.
They're just like, they're lapping everyone. And Halliburton Turner is like obviously incredible. And LeBron and AD is LeBron and AD. And Fred and Şengün by volume are just like way, way higher than them. To compare, the Raptors' highest assist combination on the year doesn't have half as many as Fred to Şengün. Also, it's no longer available. It's Dennis to Pascal at 63. And then Dennis to Jacob at 47 assists between the two of them is the next highest that the Raptors have. And this isn't a criticism of the Raptors, who have this unbelievable assist streak, and they're one of the highest assist teams in the league. This actually, I think, hammers home to you just how incredible the Fred and Şengün thing is, because one of the highest assist teams in the league and the Toronto Raptors can't sniff what these guys are doing as a duo.
By the way, I just also added this point. Şengün's also assisted Fred 44 times. So just that two-man game alone has been like 180 assists, like the crux of Houston's. Houston should even be that good offensively.
They shouldn't be. And this is like,
but this is the main reason why they're competitive offensively.
Yeah, and it's look, the more of the story is on the defensive end for them, and they've slid a little bit. They're 2 games under 500 now. They're out of a play-in spot. But you know, I thought Fred had probably a down he had a down defensive year last season. I think some of the, you know, he had almost made an all defense team at one point, and he was not in the conversation for that last year. He has an 87th percentile impact on defense this year. So how your defense performs when you're on the floor versus when you're off the floor. If we look at some of those catch-all metrics, he's right around top 20 in the league overall in terms of the impact he's had on the Rockets, which is, you know, when you have a very young team making that big a turnaround, most of the Rockets' outlook changing is about Şengün being that guy.
Yes.
But you bring in Fred, you bring in Dylan, those pieces fit a little bit. You have jumped from being irredeemably bad to really annoying to play against every night, and Fred's been a huge part of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he should be a huge part of that because he obviously got paid the max. But at the same time, we understand that Houston had that salary space, and what they really wanted to do, big picture-wise, was turn the program from being like a joke, quite frankly, to being a respectable team that's competitive every single night, and they've been able to do that. Now, how they make the next jump and the next step will depend on what other moves they make outside of Fred, who else they bring in, how those young guys continue to grow and develop. I'm already seeing some Rockets fans being like, wow, Jalen Green's not breaking out. Let's blame Fred. Like,
he has a below average usage rate. Like,
no, but come on.
Like his
it's just easy. It's always easy to blame the guy with the ball in his hands. It always is.
Yeah. And like, that's not unique to Houston. We saw that here a lot as well. And like, part of why Houston brought him in, and honestly, part of why a guy like Fred had, and this, look, some of the reason he isn't all that efficient is because he can't finish at the rim. Part of it is also that you bring that guy in to have the ball in his hands, because so that when there's 6 seconds left on the shot clock, you have someone who doesn't mind getting a bad shot up because it's better than no shot. And that'll always be the case with some point guards.
But the bigger thing is, he has played a huge role in getting Şengün to the spot where he's like an all-star candidate. And Şengün's averaging 22, 9 rebounds, 5 assists per game, a steal, a block per game, 54% shooting from the field. Still doesn't shoot the three well. Free throws can be a little inconsistent for him because he's always sniffing and like, he has the weirdest free throw routine in the league. Just look it up. But
yeah, it's like someone's like got chili peppers in his jersey or something like that.
He's fornicating with the ball before he shoots it on the free throw line. But still, I think Houston's got to be pretty happy with what Fred's doing.
Yeah, and to be clear, Şengün's free throw shooting is like, it's not elite, but it's past the point where you would ever hack him.
Yeah,
right. Like he's in the low 70s. Like you're fine.
He's been in the low 70s kind of thing.
You're just leaving probably, half a point a game on the table there. Who else? What other X's you want to bring up the Instagram pages of?
Kawhi and Norm, how are they doing?
Oh, they're doing best in the league. By the way, they had a 22-0 run to close out a game yesterday. They're ridiculous.
Man.
They're here on Friday.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun to see up close.
Is it?
I mean, do you want to watch the zombie Grizzlies or do you want to watch good basketball?
You're right. I would love to see the Raptors get clapped by 20 points.
Yeah. Clippers are 27-14 now.
Kirby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kawhi, I mean, you told me the numbers earlier off air, but Kawhi's like 50, 40, 90. Weirdly, like the lowest usage he's had in forever because they have so many pieces there. But like everything's good there. Norm is just such an unbelievable fit with what they do coming off the bench and just like, here's another 40% catch and shoot 3-point shooter and a guy who can attack closeouts.
You know what Norm's shooting from 3 this season?
I'll say 42%.
46% from 3 on 4.5 attempts per game. 46% from 3.
Honestly, my biggest take on that is feed them the ball more. Get those 3-point attempts. I know there are only so many balls to go around there, but let him shoot.
Yeah, I mean,
Norm for the 3-point contest?
Kirby.
Yeah, he really is. I don't even think Kobe shot 46% from 3, maybe from the field, but
not in a playoff game. Ooh.
Yeah, but I mean, Norm's also shooting 50% from the field.
Yeah.
Kawhi's at 52% from the field, 45% from 3. So also pretty damn good. And then also shooting 88% from the foul line. Most importantly, Kawhi stayed healthy. He's only missed 4 games all season. He's played 37 of possible 41 games. He's playing back-to-backs. He's got his extension, all hammered out.
Wow. I just looked at what do you think the Clippers are shooting on threes as a team?
As a team? First off, I know Paul George. I found this out yesterday. Paul George is second in the league in 3-point makes. So he must be really hot from 3. I don't know, man. Like probably 39%.
39.8%.
Damn.
They're
40% from 3 as a team.
And they're just shy of 50% on field goal. Like they're close to 50, 40, 80 as a team. Damn. That's right.
Yeah. This
Keep it LA.
This is what happens when you have 4 future Hall of Famers on one team.
It's like,
and a good set of role players around them.
It's so funny because like you think about when you think I think about what a sentence. When you think about ball dominant stars and like star scorers and stuff, they're good, they're efficient, they can get the volume, but I don't know that you always go to, well, they also shoot the 3 really, really well. And that's been something special about Paul George and Kawhi Leonard their entire careers as lead guys. But also James Harden is having a ridiculous 3-point shooting year. James Harden's always shot the 3 well, but because it was so many step backs and pull-ups and stuff like that, his percentages were never like elite. And then you add Norm in there, so they have 4 guys. Mm-hmm. Their top 4 scorers are all shooting 42% or better on threes. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a uniquely built team. And I shouldn't say James Harden's, he's like a 36% career 3-point shooter. So him being at 42% is really a special year for him.
It is. I mean, he's still taking his pull-ups, but he's taking more catch and shoots and stuff like that. It's been a transition for him. Anyway, whatever. The Clippers are doing really well. Kyle in Miami. You want to talk about Kyle? Kyle was in Toronto recently. Kyle's averaging 8 points per game, 4 assists, 3.5 rebounds per game. His usage is like Pat McCaw level usage. You want to guess what his usage percentage is?
10.7%.
Okay, it's a little higher than that. It's at 13, but yeah, I mean, still, it's like by far the lowest usage rate of his career. It's even lower than when he was a rookie in Memphis. His lowest with the Raptors ever was 19.6, and that was a championship year. So clearly he's not the same, but still like a pesky role player. Every time he comes back to Toronto, gets a huge ovation, dap me up. So he's having an A+ season.
He also sneaky, still 74th percentile in terms of on-off impacts and like estimated wins added and stuff.
He's always going to be good at that
still
stuff.
Doing like every once in a while, I still see a box score line where it's like, oh, Kyle played 32 minutes, took 4 shots, had 1 assist, and was plus 90.
Yeah, but you know what we don't hear anymore is the Kyle Lowry commercial.
Kyle Lowry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm good with no more of that one. It's a good drop when we're getting in our ear that we're headed to commercial shortly, but there's giggles underneath it. Shout out to Derek.
Sorry. Me and Derek had to set that one up.
Yeah.
JV. I mean, JV is JV. It's the same deal. Gets the same money every year. Serge is in Bayern Munich. Marc Gasol, I hope you're on a beach somewhere. Hopefully you're doing more humanitarian
Danny
work.
Green, if you're listening and you're retired, come on the show, man.
Oh yeah, you could book Danny Green at some point. Let's work on that during this break. Okay, we're gonna take that break. I've been your host Willow. You've been listening to the Raptors Show, or the Ex-Raptors Show, on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host William Lou. I got Blake Murphy, co-host with me, and we got on the line Big V, Vivek Jacob, writer at large, including at Sportsnet, where his recent pieces have been going up. Big V, what's going on, man? You all right?
Nothing much. I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Can you give us a repeat of what you said in the goodbye message to Alex that you didn't know would hit air?
No, we will not be repeating that ever again.
Yo, did you actually not know that was gonna go on air?
No, I didn't. I thought that was going to be airing at Hongqing, but it's all good.
No, it aired across the nation, my friend. I'm sorry.
I think we all had fun with it. Alex liked it. That's the most important thing.
That is the most important thing. But on behalf of all Asians, I say, you know what? That was actually a really funny bit that you did. Okay.
Wait, before we get into the actual basketball stuff, V. You had some personal news last week on the work side. It's not basketball related, but tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing for Cricket Canada.
Yeah, I will essentially be their beat reporter for at least the next 6 months. And Canada qualified for the T20 World Cup for the first time in its history. So that's going to be a huge landmark event. The tournament's being played across the U.S. and the West Indies. And the first game of the tournament will be Canada versus the USA. And so I think it's going to be a huge moment for the sport in the country. And I am super, super excited to be a part of this journey. I've gotten to know some of the players a little bit the last few weeks and can't wait to tell their stories.
Yeah. Well, congrats, man. I'm super glad to hear that. Looking forward to learning the sport a little bit more through you, as I do sometimes at Play in the V or when you come on for Cricket Day on Jays Talk Plus. Yeah, man, that's exciting. Congrats.
Yeah, V, I was gonna
Thanks so much.
We got to take him out to the where was it in Brampton? CAA Center?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The GT20.
That was fun.
Go catch a game.
That was really fun.
I got my Excel spreadsheets ready. That's how V sold me on it. He's like, you it's a spreadsheet sport. I'm like, all right, let's go.
So I went with friends of the program, Assad and also Sahal. Sahal did not know, like me, the rules of cricket. So the entire time, Assad was graciously explaining the rules, and he's like, "This is a 1, this is a 4, this is a 6." People holding signs that just says "sixer" on the side. Yeah. It was a great time, man. It was a great time. Okay, we're gonna pivot over to the Raptors. So one of the things that we thought just watching the game over the weekend against the Knicks, where they lost by 26 points and it wasn't that competitive in the second half, was just a question of, okay, you know what? I get it. We're in a rebuild. This is official. Pascal's gone. OG's gone. More pieces will be out the door eventually. We'll talk about that with Grange in the next segment. Just a question of how long the rebuild's going to be, right? Because I think people just want to know what to expect. Like, is this going to be Raptors take a dip for this year and then they're back next year? Are they going to need like 2-3 years with this? Is it going to be worst case scenario 5, 6, 7, 8 indefinite kind of thing that like Detroit's in, for example? So, V, I just want to start their big picture. Like, how long do you think this Raptors rebuild will be?
So I don't have any real expectations of them being very competitive next year. I think that next year will be, again, what Masai has been preaching with regards to patience. And so that'll be another rebuild year. After that, I think it all comes down to, how much does Scottie improve over the next couple of years? How much does Emmanuel quickly get closer to his ceiling? How does RJ Barrett shape up as a player? And I think that core will determine, how quickly they can get back into the postseason. And, if you were to project out, a lot of people have made the comparison between Tyrese Maxey and Emmanuel quickly. I look at Tyrese Maxey as, a fringe superstar. And what I've seen from Emmanuel quickly, I'm really encouraged, but I would probably put his ceiling a bit lower and say, hey, this guy has all-star potential. If he turns out to be that, then that's fantastic. But it really comes down to Scottie. Like, if you look at the Indiana Pacers, part of why they're able to go and make that move for Pascal Siakam, it's because Tyrese Halliburton has become effectively the best point guard in the league. And so I think when you look at that, it's saying, hey, what can Scottie be a couple years from now? That will dictate how soon this team is really back in contention.
So one of the more difficult things with navigating this from here for Toronto is going to be you have at least one of the big pieces in Scottie Barnes, and he'll sign a rookie scale extension this offseason because they always do. But that kind of starts the clock ticking on, making sure that player is happy, making sure you can win around them in that window. When you look at mechanically how this rebuild or retooling is going to work, look, there's a scenario where the Raptors look at having a couple picks, a lot of cap flexibility this offseason, Scottie already being, an all-star level talent, and say, let's go right now. Let's try to do it right away. There is a scenario where they hold that off a little while longer. I don't think there's a scenario where they really take a long view. It's like, hey, by 2027, we're going to be competing with Scottie Barnes. How do you think they navigate that need to basically be ready to pounce and make a Pacers-like move, but not making sure you don't do it too early to where you end up in, hey, you used your assets and your flexibility and you're not good enough?
Yeah, I think, in terms of that clarity, we'll get some of it between now and the trade deadline. We have to wait and see if anything more happens with the picks that they've acquired, if anything happens with Gary Trent Jr., Bruce Brown. And so I think that will determine some of it. And then I think when you evaluate, when to pounce versus when to stay patient, I think Masai Ujiri has shown that he will lean on the patient side. And the calculus, I think, essentially comes down to, hey, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Scottie Barnes, that's your core. What's the best way to fit around them? And so I think over the next while, you will be evaluating Jakob Poeltl and saying, okay, is this the best suited center for the future? Masai, when he spoke at the presser, suggested that they could go one way or the other with Jakob, that they believe in him as a center, but hey, he could turn into something else. And so I think he'll be part of the evaluation. And then I think what we're already seeing in the few games post OG, and now obviously Bruce Brown has helped Scottie in that regard, but Scottie has had to defend on the perimeter more. And I think we've seen enough to say that he is better off on the back line. So is there another player that comes in that allows Scottie to stay there and kind of that free safety and help in that way on the defensive end? And so I think that's the calculus now that you have to evaluate and get right. And so for Masai, I think he'll be patient in making sure he identifies who should be the right guy. And that's the thing we need to see change, right? Say, for example, when you look at the Jakob Poeltl acquisition, you can't go out again and just get a center just for the sake of getting a center. It has to be now about getting the right fits around Scottie, around Quickley, around RJ.
Yeah. And, I think you will need to see individual steps taken forward from those guys as well. As you mentioned, that's what's ultimately going to decide the timeline of this thing. It's interesting to me, too, because I don't think there's been a single rebuild that Masai has done. You know what I mean? Like,
the Melo trade when he was in Denver, which was, the Nuggets ended up not being in the wilderness too long. They got a lot of pieces for that and built pretty.
They were instantly competitive. That's my point. It's
but was that intentional, or was that like the Rudy Gay and Bargnani trades again, where like stuff just clicked in?
Well, that's the thing for Masai is he doesn't even have losing seasons on his record.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, Tampa is the one exception, but Tampa was such like a, that should be an apostrophe over that whole season. Like the Raptors not playing, that's the circumstances, all that kind of stuff. Basically, in normal 82-game, non-world-changing pandemic seasons, Masai has always had winning teams. So I don't even know what the shape of this rebuild is going to look like. Like, I suppose even the Tampa year, they definitely held out a lot of players, and we saw, like, Aaron Baines play a game at 3 one time with Freddie Gillespie and Kem Birch. I don't think we're going to hit that level this year. Otherwise, I think MLSC should offer refunds, full refunds to people who bought tickets. But, yeah, I mean, like, what – like, is it going to get even worse than this before it gets better, or is it just going to be like they're going to see this base? They already have 3 guys that they feel like they're comfortable for the future, and just kind of build off of that, kind of the usual Masai rebuild of, we made a trade, but actually we're still going to be competitive.
So I don't like, if you look at this team right now, I mean, before the Pascal trade, they were 15-25, but if you were to look just like in between the OG trade and the Pascal trade, they looked like a decent team, right? That looked like a 500-ish, 500-plus team. Mm-hmm. And so this team now, my expectations are a fair bit lower. And I think with potential moves to still come before the deadline, it'll go down even more. Now, obviously, you're not going to get into that bottom 5 of the NBA or the forlorn 5, as they're getting to be known now.
Is that their name?
That apparently is the name that's been going around.
All right.
So
The forlorn 5. Got you.
and so I don't think you can be that bad, but I do think I do still see next year as kind of a rebuilding year, as a growing pains year. I think that obviously the quicker that you see them learn, the quicker you can accelerate. But I would say that next year there's still more to be had. With Scotty, like we still see some of the growing pains with the passing, maybe a little too high risk at times. So, as that progresses, then, you start to look at the options that better fit him. But I think for the next year-ish, you're probably in an evaluation mode that they've kind of done before changing directions here. And then you go from there. I don't think Masai is going to jump the gun, considering the way he's operated in general.
It's also, there are no real examples of Masai going full rebuild and the Wilderness. The Nuggets got bad a little bit after Masai left, but who knows how much of that was the next front office. The Raptors franchise itself is also not littered with very successful rebuilds. If you read Prehistoric, Alex Wong's book, obviously.
Wow, you got to plug even when he's not here?
Got to do it.
Come on.
Got to do it.
Don't buy Prehistoric.
But like one of the things that permeates the second half of that book is this friction between being competitive right away and rebuilding with a long-term win, because you have a new franchise, you have tickets to sell, you have a coach who wants to win every game, and you have a GM who's thinking more of like, hey man, we got to get some talent, we got to build this up. And then if you look at the, there are other eras as well. The Rob Babcock era did not hit the reset post Vince Carter particularly well. The Colangelo era was kind of always,
it started well.
It did. And part of what is difficult about it is like you can like some of the moves within that. It just like it really did seem like it was going well, and then there was just not quite enough patience to like really let it get where it was going. Like you jumped a little too early on the Jermaine O'Neal, Turkoglu, Marion bandwagon of trying to make those fixes.
Bargnani also didn't really like fully pan out as the number 1 pick.
So V, we maybe can't look at Masai's history or the Raptors' history for good examples of how to do this. But when you look around the league at what teams have successfully done this or unsuccessfully done this in the last little while, what stands out to you?
Well, I mean, I think the Utah Jazz look really impressive in terms of what they've been able to do in terms of the assets that they've been able to. Obviously, the Rudy Gobert trade, rather, they were able to really set them up for the future remarkably well. I think getting Lauri Markkanen was such a huge get. I think they are really well positioned to make a couple moves and be back in the running there. And I think that would be a fairly quick rebuild. I don't think the Raptors are going to go the OKC Thunder style with the picks, even though, if you look at it, that happened pretty quickly because they got a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Paul George. And so the Raptors, that's where, you argue that they missed out in terms of the Pascal Siakam trade, right? And if they maybe made a move earlier, what could that have looked like compared to what the return is now? Now they've really got to hit on these picks if they have them, right? And so I think the pressure is still on them. I think last trade deadline, we said that they had backed themselves into a corner, and then things got worse over the summer because Fred VanVleet departed with no return. And so I think they're still working their way out of the corner. They've done well to get quickly. They've done well to get RJ Barrett. But the way the Pascal Siakam situation played out, there's still doubts over, how long this could take, as opposed to, maybe those big swing trades that get you into a quicker rebuild, like, we saw with the Indiana Pacers getting Tyrese Halliburton, with the Utah Jazz getting a Lauri Markkanen. That type of stuff is what you missed out on.
Well, Utah would be a nice avenue because they also found, in addition to the new players, a head coach that they can move forward into in the future with Will Hardy.
Yeah.
He's done an amazing job. And we just saw the Utah Jazz play the Raptors. about last week, and wow, really impressive for a team starting Chris Dunn and Simone Fontecchio. I felt like we were playing the KD Warriors.
Don't do my guy Chris Dunn like that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right, man. We need your. You know how Zach Lowe has his Marcus All Stars or Luke Walton All Stars, whatever. Like you gotta
my
get your
Chris
Blake
Dunn All Stars of guys who actually aren't good, but I'll refuse to believe they're not good until they're finally good.
I mean, is he the best guard defender in the NBA right now?
I'd still probably go Caruso, but he's up there.
Well,
yeah.
Again, Caruso's allowed to grab.
And then I guess, do we even consider
check.
Drew Holiday a guard defender because he's guarding forwards and wings most of the time?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's in the conversation, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. What do they get? They just signed him, right? Like,
Chris Dunn?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on a 10-day last year.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Great find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe Wolfon's so mad he's not part of this discussion to talk about Chris Dunn, by the way.
Yeah. By the way, I was listening to the Low Post over the weekend, and he was having this discussion with Bill Simmons, and he kind of compared the Pascal trade similar to the Vucevic trade that Orlando was able to pull off. Orlando was also kind of 500, kind of going nowhere. We got this player. We're probably going to have to pay him. You know, he's entering his 30s, all-star level player, but all at the same time, maybe impact metrics don't pay him as highly as his counting numbers. So they moved off of him. Now, I don't think that they're the same player at all. I don't think Pascal's situation is the same as Vucevic, but kind of compare those two trades. Do you see some comparison in that sense, Blake?
I mean, I think it's fair in that Orlando was in a spot. Now, Toronto was on the come down after having been very successful. Orlando's more on the, hey, this didn't come up the way that we thought it would. And that's, I think Orlando's decision is tougher because they had what they thought was the core with Vooch and Jonathan Isaac and stuff like that. And they had to admit, and this is a very difficult thing for front offices to do, that, hey, those two quick playoff windows that we had out in the first round, that's not it. We can't keep going with that. We've got to change that up. Now, the Raptors kind of coming back down off a core is I think there's a little bit more grace given in a situation like that of its time. And look, I really like where Orlando's at now. Yeah. But it's worth noting that even doing that, making a good deal where you're still owed picks, where it gave you the push down the standings to add some really high talent, Orlando has still not been back to the playoffs. Yeah. This stuff takes time. So even a very good comparison like that, if you believe they're spiritually in similar places and it's similarly a good deal that sets you up for the next couple of years, you still got to hit on some stuff over the next little bit to get where you need to go. So I do agree that it's a good comparison point. I don't think it's a comparison point where you are like slam dunk. Yes, that is, that's the model for moving forward, because Orlando is only now scraping over being a 500 team and getting back to being my favorite team to watch outside of the Thunder. But so a good comparison, but probably not the and Utah is similar to this, where another good comparison, and Utah's sitting there at the deadline, like they
might sell again
at the end of year 2 of a pretty big teardown, being like, we probably need one more selling year to be back to relevancy. So they're good moves, they're smart moves, but this stuff does take time, even when you're doing it really well. Yeah, is I guess my point.
All right, maybe to
also with
go ahead.
Sorry, I would just say with Orlando, they've been really bad for really long, and they have not had the success that you would expect, right? Like 2013, they drafted Victor Oladipo second. 2014, they had the 4th pick. They got Aaron Gordon. They had the 12th pick. They got Dario Saric. Like, they have had high picks. 2015, they had the 5th pick. They got Mario Hezonja. Like, and nothing's come of it. Like, their high point was winning game 1 against the Raptors in the 2019 year, Damon Jones thinking they were going to win the series. Like, that's their high point of the last
I forgot
decade.
about that.
The DJ Augustin game.
Yo, that's incredible level of hatred to be like, the eventual champions are going to lose to the Magic first round because DJ Augustin hit a game-winning 3, man. Get out of here.
Yeah. Anyway, so, obviously there was the Jonathan Isaac pick. There, there's a lot of picks. Mo Bamba. So they've had a lot of opportunities to get it right, and it's finally kind of happening for them. And we'll see. Yeah, we will see.
Okay, maybe to wrap out this, one of you guys have to decide or give me the best case scenario for next year's Raptors season, and one of you guys have to give me the worst case scenario for next year's Raptors season.
Oh, let me do worst case. V can do best case.
All right, V. Give us the best case scenario of what happens for the Raptors next season.
So I think in a best case scenario,
like not like, okay, they signed Steph Curry and KD and whatever. Like, I mean, like, realistically with the group. Yeah.
No, of course. In terms of being as competitive as possible, it probably involves keeping Bruce Brown. And you see what you can get for Gary Trent Jr. I mean, I'm not too enthused by what's there in the free agent market. And so I think I would probably just play that out. And then, you potentially, if you can put yourself in a situation where you're using Bruce Brown in a Pascal Siakam type trade next year, then maybe
all right.
and you get another all-star type player to come into the mix, because then if Scotty really hits, if RJ really hits, and continues on the trajectory that he's been on in a Raptor uniform, if quickly really levels up, then you're in position to maybe you package Bruce Brown plus whatever else and see if you can get another type of star. I think that's probably a best case scenario. A realistic best case scenario.
Is that a playoff team? Like, are we sniffing playoffs? Like, can I even dream of the playoffs next year, Vivek? I'm begging.
I mean, in a best case scenario, you would think so. Like, again, if they were to keep Bruce Brown and you have this connecting piece and you have Scotty Barnes again level up, say all-star, say he's at all-star caliber level this season, if he levels up closer to superstar for next season, and then you have quickly looking like an all-star next year, then yeah, I think it should pan out that way, because you do look at Scotty as a two-way player. You do look at Emmanuel quickly as a two-way player. And then Jakob Poeltl, that's where I think maybe the fit has got to be right. Does Jonte Porter continue to hit and then become a stable rotation piece? These are the things that the Raptors have to get back to hitting on, right? And I think part of why we're so excited about Jonte Porter is because we've missed this, right? Yeah. We've missed the Raptors having this type of success with someone coming from the G League, coming from, an unexpected avenue of success.
Yeah, a Pascal Fred level success. Which we want more of. Okay, Blake, what's the worst case scenario at the end of next season?
All right, let me cook. Okay, so
let me cook. Let me hate.
So at the trade deadline this year, the Raptors decided to hold on to Bruce Brown. He'll be better as a
I didn't think both your scenarios would involve Bruce Brown this heavily, but all right, keep going.
And then when they reach free agency with all the cap flexibility they now have, they realize that it's not as attractive a free agent class. They just roll back Bruce Brown. He's an expiring. You kind of do the dance with him on that side. Obviously, the part of the worst case scenario is that even though Scotty Barnes is already very good and should be an all-star, next year he comes back and he's about the same level. And Emmanuel quickly comes back and he's about the same level. The star, the potential to become clearly a starting caliber point guard and maybe even a borderline all-star. Yeah. He hasn't tapped into that.
But he's like a Mike Conley type. He tops out that way.
Maybe. Yeah. RJ looks more like New York RJ than Toronto RJ.
All right.
And probably the biggest component of this, you end up keeping your pick via the draft lottery this year. And then next year, you're about the same quality of team and you're staring down in a much bigger draft that decision of, do you have to go further down to keep your pick in a really good draft? Or do you have to, are you kind of, you don't get desperate just to make sure that you convey a bad pick, but you're on that kind of fringe. Like this year, they're on that fringe, being 6th or 7th last, but nobody really cares that much because they have the other picks now, and it's not that spicy a draft. Right. If you're in that spot next year and what's a really good draft, it's a lot more uncomfortable. So in addition to the young guys you've bet on to take leaps, haven't quite taken them yet, the cap flexibility you'd built in through these trades doesn't really materialize in a player. You end up keeping the pick this year, so you're in that awkward position about potentially conveying a really good pick and a really good draft next year. And then with all of that, you would have used all the picks you got from this year, your 2020. There's just not a clear asset plan to how you're going to get better from there, other than that internal improvement that maybe didn't come up. Now, I don't think that's a likely scenario. I think there's too much upside with these young players. I think there's too much likelihood they maneuver between now and the deadline. They maneuver with the extra picks that they now have in the offseason, things like that. But if you're looking at a worst case scenario, that is it. And it's another scenario where the use of your mid-level, say in the offseason, is, the guys who are spicy names don't want to take your money because they can take it from better teams. And you end up kind of in a very similar roster situation, but the flexibility you've built is you're not able to utilize it.
What's scary is the scenario Blake is describing is essentially the worst case scenario is that the Raptors repeat this season, which is also quite
Doesn't
possible.
seem all the,
I was like, yeah, I mean, there's some Bruce Brown's elements to this, but in general, sounds a lot like this year, which I really hope it's not. But I mean, again, that's where you're gonna have to hope that these young guys really take a step. Whoever the Raptors end up drafting,
And again, I want to be clear.
Promise.
I don't think that is the scenario that's going to happen. But the exercise is best and worst case scenario.
Exactly.
I don't want someone to like grab one clip of this and be like, Blake said they're going to give away the 7th pick in the 2025 draft.
Aggregator. Yeah. All right. Well, Vivek, I appreciate you coming on, and yeah, I look forward to watching a cricket match with you sometime. I'm dead serious about this, man.
We'll make it happen, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Vivek Jacob, writer at large. Hey, before we get to Michael Grange.
Yeah. It's time now for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. The Raptors are, get this, 7-point favorites. It's only the 5th time this year they've been that big a favorite. They were 10-point favorites against Portland early in the year, and it stands out as one of their worst losses. They were 8-point favorites against Washington. They won the game, but they didn't cover.
Yeah.
They were in the first meeting with Detroit, 9.5-point favorites, and beat them by 400 points.
That was good.
And then they were 12.5-point favorites against Charlotte, and actually snuck by, ended up winning that game by enough in that one.
I remember. The revenge game.
The better Charlotte game, yes. If you're wondering how a team that looked like this on Saturday and has lost 6 of their last 7 is a 7-point favorite, the Memphis Grizzlies will be without John Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, Derrick Rose, Jake LaRavia, and potentially Xavier Tillman, who is questionable. Between these two teams, by the way, with Jakob Poeltl out on the Raptors side, if you had lined up at the start of the season what you thought the two starting fives would look like when they met in January, Scotty Barnes, Jaren Jackson Jr., the only names left.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I know we've been kind of talking about the Raptors, but like, I don't really see how you wouldn't try to back the Raptors in this case. There is an aspect of the Grizzlies being unpredictable, I suppose, because you don't really know what this kind of group will look like. I suppose you could say the same thing about the Raptors, but I mean, realistically, the Raptors are at home. They're much healthier as compared to the other side, and especially for the younger guys, like I would love to see a big game from Scotty. I'd love to see a big game from Quickly. I'd love to see a big game from RJ. Just to sort of at least reestablish that, like, yeah, we're probably not going to be winning that many games, but at the same time, we can at least beat the Grizzlies.
You want to see proof of concept that these guys are.
Roster?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
if they lose this one, I mean, it'd be pretty frustrating, to be honest.
Yeah. So this is who the Grizzlies started last game. By the way, the Grizzlies have lost 4 or 5. I know there was some cool buzz when they upset the Warriors the other night. It was the cool G.G. Jackson game.
Yeah.
And Vince Williams has been a nice story for them. They started Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Vince Williams, Santi Aldama, and Jaren Jackson last game.
Yeah. It sounds about right, honestly. I mean, they've got half a team. Like, I feel bad for them. I really do. But, Raptors should capitalize on this one. Take the Raptors. -7. That was Between the Lines.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I was going to redo the ad read for you.
Oh, it's all good. Let's read it together next time. Brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. Okay, we're going to take our last break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. When we come back, let's bring in Michael Grange. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Lou, Blake Murphy, co-host, and we are joined in studio by Michael Grange. Grange, you got to be like number 4 in terms of like Raptors show appearances. Like we get you all the time, man. It's like you and Vivek. Like
I'm trending up.
Yeah.
So that's fine. Enjoy it.
Especially coming into the deadline here. I mean, I know you're going to be on the road for a lot of that.
Yeah, I was going to say December, January, February. I seem to make a lot more. Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to blame Alex. Alex was the guy calling you every day at just texting you and seeing if you're going to be free at 2:30 and. Here you are at 3:30.
Now we're just so the Raptors head out on Sunday. They start a 6-game road trip heading into the trade deadline. And one of my favorite trips to do, Grange, over the years was like the road trip that times with the trade deadline because you're on the ground, you get the reaction. It's pretty fascinating. It could be a dud if nothing happens. And I don't know if, a Chris Boucher or Bruce Brown deal is sending shockwaves through, but you're going to be on 5 of those games. I'd imagine we're going to tag you in after shoot-arounds and things like that.
Yeah.
But
we're booking you for next week, actually.
Yeah. How much are you looking forward to that? Like, is this one of your favorite trips of the year as well, or am I a sicko?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, especially this year, and I think last year too. They went out west twice in this January period. So, I was just on that trip where, they had that circle through Sacramento and Golden State and LA. That was pretty wild. Just in terms of, LA is amazing just in terms of who shows up. And, it's kind of like I say, it's the place where rumors go to be amplified. But And then this one, as it gets the clock ticks closer, little, as you point out, like, I mean, with OG and Pascal gone, a little bit of the air has been out of the balloon, but I think the Raptors are still going to be busy. In fact, they're definitely going to be busy, according to people who should know. And then, but also like just a great trip, right? Like, I mean, we're going to get first time seeing Fred in person for a long time. That's going to be fascinating. We got, going to see Shea, going to see, going to get to visit Garrett Temple, the king of Louisiana in New Orleans.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I think it's, I'm looking forward to it, and then start off in Chicago. So should be a good trip.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the Raptors are going to be busy, and you wrote a piece about Bruce Brown. I love
Excellent piece, by the way.
Excellent piece, and I love the quote that you got in there. I'm not signing no leases. Yeah, he's likely to continue being moved. He's already been moved once this year, coming over as the main salary, I suppose, in the Pascal Siakam trade, or at least the most recognizable player aside from the picks. What's his situation? Because there was a lot of talk coming out of New York where he is a CAA client, and the Knicks are very clearly interested in Bruce Brown. And I would love to hear the level of interest in Bruce Brown, because you also described that in your piece. What's his situation? Because, I'm just hoping it's not another Goran Dragic situation, but it doesn't sound to be at least a repeat of that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I think the brief interactions I've had with him, both the first day he was here when he played against Chicago, and then had a decent chance to chat with him in New York a couple of different times. And great guy. Like, I mean, you can see why this guy is coveted by good teams, because he's tough as nails. He's good. He's smart. It really says a lot when guys the level of Harden, Durant, Jokic, Murray, these guys want to play with you.
Yeah,
like, that's a big, big compliment. And so all that stuff is great. But, it was interesting just talking to him about his contract, which, he kind of had a choice. Denver could only pay him so much. I think they could only go like 20% over his existing number. So it wasn't enough for what he was worth.
It was like $8 million, I think.
Yeah, I think that was as high as it could go. And so he kind of had a choice in the offseason. I'm sure he could have got a full mid-level somewhere. So 4 years, 54, I think it would have came out to, which is obviously not bad. But he's still a pretty young player and coming off a really good year, has a ring.
Hasn't been paid fully yet.
Yeah, and he hasn't got that. So he kind of was, Indiana stepped in and says, look, we'll give you 23 guaranteed with a team option for the next 22. So let's just say $45 million. So he's almost getting the full boat mid-level in the space of 2 years. And even if it's 1 year, it's still, it's okay. But because it's a team option on that second year, Blake's nodding. He knows all this stuff. But
it's a huge flexibility piece, whether the Raptors keep him or someone else acquires him.
He said to me, like, the minute he signed it, he knew there was a possibility he would be in play. And what was interesting was he is expected to play at least the season in Indiana, but because things went so well there, that actually convinced him that it was more likely he was going to get moved, because all of a sudden he became a big contract number that they could use to go and get that singular player to pair with Tyrese Halliburton for, the bulk of his prime. And we know what happened. So now he's, he was very clear. Look, he's moved a lot. He says, like, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not advocating for anything. I don't know anything. It's completely in Masai's hands, and he'd be perfectly happy to my ear to stay here. And I think if the Raptors' goal is not to is to kind of get rid of this pick obligation, I think there's an argument to keep him. But if you've got multiple contending teams who are looking for a guy who can round out a rotation, you got to listen.
How real is the Knicks interest in him? Because I think
it's real.
Okay.
The way
so
it was
Knicks wanted
explained,
to sign him in the summertime too.
Yeah, they wanted to give him, but they could only go mid-level. Apparently, Tibbs, when he was in Minnesota during his draft year, remember Tibbs was president general manager with Minnesota, and he was on his radar then.
Okay.
And the other little element there is he just had this awesome year playing for Mike Malone. Well, guess what? That's your Van Gundy Tibbs mafia, right? So he used to be an assistant with Tibbs back when. Right. So I think he's got all the intel he could ever want there. So, but it was funny. I was talking to one guy who, he would be in position to know, and he kind of said, well, Tibbs is very interested in Bruce Brown. We're not sure, not 100% sure the Knicks are interested, but the Tibbs is very interested.
Got you.
So, but that said, I mean, they're definitely looking. I talked to some people in New York and in their front office, and they want to add talent. And I think their first goal is they want to add a star. And like they look at that team, and if they could add one guy at or above the level of Randall and Brunson, like that's a formidable team. They still have the pieces to do it. But failing that, I think they're looking for rotation depth, and I think they see Bruce Brown as a good option.
By the way, if Bruce Brown lasts the week, so plays tonight and then plays Friday, he'll pass Goran Dragic for minutes as a Raptor.
Remember when Goran Dragic?
That's how narrow this has to be. Yeah.
He started the home opener, by the way, that season. What was
Crazy.
that about?
Yeah. The surprise start.
I think he
when
actually
someone
played
was
pretty
hurt.
good that game.
We lost to the Wizards by 20, though.
What a weird
All I
era.
remember is Delano hit that half-court shot for his first ever basket.
Good.
As an NBA player, but also as a Raptor. That was a crazy debut.
Okay, so in seriousness, look, Goran Dragic eventually was used to turn into Thad Young, I guess, is what you could say about that. But
Yeah.
Bruce Brown, there is going to be much more of a market for him than there was for Goran Dragic, obviously.
Much younger. That's the big thing.
Yeah, and just better at this point. So, Grange, when you look, Masai kind of talked us through a lot of this on Thursday, what they're trying to do now. We saw them do the OG trade that really focused on players now. We saw them do the Pascal trade that really focused more on the pick equity they're getting back. Do you have a sense of what whether it's in a Bruce Brown trade, Chris Boucher, whoever else is available, what the Raptors' priority is here? Or is it more of a, hey, we just need assets at this point and we'll figure out how they all fit together later?
If we were talking before the Pascal trade, I would have said no. They're looking for players. And I would think if they can, I think if they have a choice and they can get players that fit their timeline, that fit their needs, that whatever, I think they're going to go with that. They're in a bit of a weird situation because I don't think I can say I know for a fact they had no plans to be rebuilding this year. They had no intentions to be rebuilding. This has all kind of happened despite their best intentions. And so I think it could be very well they'd be at a stage where they're like, look, we just got to get the best we can get. And if it ends up being, bad money but a good pick, we go that way. If it ends up being a good player with term, we go that way. Like, I don't think they're in a position, what are they, 8-19 since they were 500? Like, damn. I don't think they're in a position to be kind of fine-tuning what they get back. I think they need to get something that can turn into something.
And you might not have the choice with the players you have. Bruce Brown, I think you can probably be selective, but if you're talking about the other pieces on the roster, if you're moving those, it's kind of a, well, what can you get?
Well, I think the interesting too is like, can the Raptors really afford to take on another pick in this year's draft?
I mean, yes, but there is diminishing returns to having so many picks in one draft, but you can also like package those and move up, turn them into future assets. So I'm not quite as worried about that. Like, I don't think, like Masai basically told us, I'm not coming into next year with 3 rookies that I picked in the draft.
Can I just, like, I'll ask you guys, like this notion of packaging picks and moving up, like, nobody else wants any picks in this draft either.
Well, it's I think,
what do we miss? What am I missing here?
And the Raptors have had opportunities in the past to do that or to buy into the draft to take extra picks. And this group, and this was justified very early on, a little less so lately, is so confident in their ability to land undrafted guys or undervalued guys that they haven't seen the need. I think the thinking is probably, there will be some teams out there with no picks who would be willing to get in on picks. Like we saw Denver last year, trade Oklahoma City, a future first that has way more upside because they needed second-round picks who could help right now.
They need cost control seniors.
Yes, and as we enter the era where there are stricter and stricter luxury tax hits at the highest levels, and there is now a CBA restriction that lets you sign your second-round picks for longer without using your mid-level, I do think there's a type of team that might be more interested in that. But yes, I don't think you're turning around to going to San Antonio. Would you like 3 picks in this draft instead on top of the 4 you already have? That part I definitely get. Michael, outside of Bruce Brown, what sense do you get? I said on the show the other day, I have heard fairly certainly that if a team comes with a reasonable offer, you can get Chris Boucher. Have you heard similar, and have you heard anything to that effect about other vets on this team?
I'd be a little surprised if Chris Boucher is still a Raptor come the trade deadline, and I think that's a reflection on where he is in terms of his contract and what he could do. Like if you're talking about teams that are trying to win a playoff series, win multiple playoff series, and Chris is, first of all, biased. Like, he is literally maybe my favorite player. Like, I mean,
he's great person, great energy guy,
and for all the reasons he drives people crazy, is maybe why
mine
I
too,
like him more.
for sure.
But so this is no shade at all to Chris. I just think
great
that,
human being too, man.
I just think that if you're a team and you're one of these teams that's really trying to win, and you're looking for a little depth in some specific positions, Chris has that ability to win a quarter, win a half, win 3 possessions in a row. Like, it can go the other way too. We all know that, but
on a deep team, he gives you that ability.
He's a game-changing player, and that can be for good and bad sometimes. But I mean, you can easily picture him. You're down 2-1, and you're down in the second half, and you throw him in, and he gets fouled 3 times, and
all of a sudden you're making a 30-point comeback.
Yeah. So anyway, all that said, and I just think that age-wise, and with another year on his deal left, and if the Raptors are trying to maybe carve out some cap space, I think that he could be a guy that he'd net you a couple of second-round picks, I'm sure.
So we got a lot of picks in a draft that a lot of people don't want, and maybe a lot of cap space in a year where not a lot of free agents are in.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Look, I mean,
Wow.
I don't know if we want to go too far down that road, but,
Sorry.
I just think that, I think this is sort of a product of when you don't necessarily pick a path and you kind of are maybe too invested in your own success previously, and like, for good reason. We all know that, but I just think that had there been a really cold, hard discussion this time a year ago, and they had decided, what, I mean, I think it's not like this is a bad team, but maybe this is the time to kind of move on, rebuild, reshape. And, I just think that they'd be a year further along, and maybe with some more assets to do it. That's all water on the bridge. So now you got to figure it out as you go.
You can't cry over spilled milk, like Masai said. And he did say the word patience a lot. He's like, I got a lot of patience. Now the question is, do we have a lot of patience? Do fans have a lot of patience to watch a rebuild? And I think that there is going to be that patience, so long as the prospects that get in are exciting, like Quickly, like RJ, like Scotty. What about Gary, though? Because I feel like age-wise, he actually does fit that timeline. He's not much older than those guys.
He just turned 25?
Yeah, just turned 25. Yeah. Is Gary going to be here long-term? Like, what happened in the offseason where it was like maybe they were going to extend him, but then also that didn't happen, and then he picked up a player option, so now he's an unrestricted free agent. What's the future there?
I mean, I think they like the player. They like the person on their team. Like, it was kind of funny. I remember last year, and Gary, the perception of Gary maybe publicly was I don't know what it was. Like I don't think people recognized exactly how good a pro he was.
Okay.
And how and I remember having kind of digging into that and having conversations around it. And
interesting.
Last year when you had all these question marks in terms of contracts and so-called selfishness and all these other issues, people telling me, look, Gary Trent's the least of our problems. You know what I mean? Like, he is, I think they really respect and appreciate how he does his job. I think he's really good at one or two things. They're valuable things. And to their credit, like, he's probably played himself a lot cheaper, right? Like, I mean, if they were going to extend him a year ago, I don't know if this number would be the same.
Good outcome, poor process for getting a better Gary Trent Jr. contract.
So, and last I checked, I don't think there's a ton of, like, he's not going to get you a first-round pick. Like, he's not like a great demand for him out there. But again, he could be a guy. If Chris Boucher, if we think he can get you a couple of seconds, I'm sure Gary Trent can get you a couple of seconds at least.
It's also, we did the Knicks thing with CAA and Bruce Brown. It's like, it's always worth keeping in mind at least a little bit that Gary Trent is a clutch guy, and the Lakers are one of the worst shooting teams in basketball.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for Gary, it's just like, what's also a little difficult is you have Quickly, you have RJ, and then you have Scotty now. Ideally, they play 1, 2, 3 for you in a lineup, so it's hard to see Gary long term as a fit with those 3 guys in a starting context. And for And that's fine as long as he's cool with coming off the bench.
I think
but then I feel like he's
offensively
way
it's
more
fine
productive.
because Scotty's kind of positionless and Gary's shooting becomes so important.
You're a really
in
small
a line.
team, though.
It is, well, that's the thing is defensively it's just not good in
Right.
addition to being small.
There you go.
And I mean, I think, like it hasn't escaped my attention that Grady's played real minutes
yeah.
3 out of the last 4 games. And I think he's definitely played the best little stretch he's had as a Raptor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there was a choice between, especially on a rebuilding team, between, having an obstacle to Grady Dick getting all the minutes he could possibly handle and, having to throw money and years at Gary, I mean, I think they would make that choice.
May I recycle a joke I used on Twitter on Saturday?
Of course.
The more the Raptors look like a 905 team, the more comfortable Grady's looked.
Oh, wow. By the way, Grady did all 4 shots out of the left corner the other game.
Well,
Very
you know what?
Interesting player. Yeah.
He runs there. He gets there in a hurry. He's set up. His footwork's good, and he's making them. So good for him. I just think that I had a thought, and it's kind of just went away. It's a good one too.
Well,
Wow.
you tell it to us down at the arena, and we'll paraphrase it brutally and clumsily tomorrow. You know what Grange told us down at the arena?
Yeah. We'd have 3 more minutes, so
We could be the aggregators from what Grange tells us down at the barn.
Any thoughts on Dennis, Otto, Thad, just like the vets on the team?
Jacob,
like,
who Masai keeps the
Jacob.
only piece of all this that he keeps tripling down on.
You know what, Grange? Let me run this Jakob
Okay.
proposal by you because no one wants to hear all the other stuff. To be honest, no offense. Sorry. The Jakob thing. Could you call San Antonio and say we can return Jakob? I will take store credit, as in I will move some of the protections off this pick if I really want to like tank full on and not have to play percentages or play limbo with like Washington, for example, at the bottom of the standings. Can you call them back and say, look, listen, we will give you back Jakob, you give us some salary, whatever, and then we move some of the protections around on the pick?
I would do it 100%.
What do you think San Antonio would do? Because wasn't there a bit of interest in San Antonio in just retaining Jakob?
Well, I mean, I think the last I heard is that San Antonio's even kicked around at DeJounte Murray, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah.
I can almost get there with the Doug McDermott expiring. Almost get there.
Yeah, all right.
I think if from their point of view, when I was down in San Antonio in November, like they love him. He loves it there,
Yeah.
and they need what he does. I mean, especially with alongside Wembanyama. So, like, why not?
Okay.
I think if you're Toronto, you got to be calling everybody. You got to be creative.
Yeah.
And
I
I
thought we
think
got 2 phones.
You go in full GM mode.
right.
Just put on trade block, put on trade block, put on trade block.
I just think that
Uh-huh.
I think the reality is kind of dawning that they could be in for here. This is I think the thought I was
Okay.
I got stuck on the
There we
the
go.
other minute is as I look at this and I look at the roster, I look where they're at, I look at their assets. To me, this looks like next year is not going to be any better. Like I don't think there's a magic potion in free agency. You just never know, obviously. But and so I think the biggest risk they face is, I think they need to be in position to be able to have a really good pick next year.
Okay.
And
So bottom all the way
I'm not
up.
going to call it tanking, but I think that is a really good draft. I've had people, like, it's no secret, but people in that organization have watched Cooper Flagg. They think he's as good as they get.
Okay.
He's I'm not gonna say generational, but he is a 1 in 5 year type prospect minimum. And and I think the real risk you run, like what would be the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Right, you don't keep your pick this year. San Antonio picks 7th. You keep your pick this year, but you're just as bad next year. Next thing you know, you're giving up the 6th pick or the 7th pick in the draft next year in a really strong draft. Like, I just think you want to, whatever steps you got to take to make sure that next year you're in a position to draft really well. I think you got to start thinking about.
Well, on that sober note, we're going to wrap the podcast. So thanks everyone for listening to the Raptors Show. And we'll be back tomorrow.